Okay, today I have the pleasure of interviewing Lonnie Tiegs. He's got a global organization called Ovalifts. How are you doing today, Lonnie?
Very good, thanks, Warren. How are you?
I'm better than you then. I'm doing better than you, actually. I'm having a good day. So thanks for taking your time. I really appreciate you doing this, and I'm excited to learn a little more about your business and gain some wisdom from you.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thanks, Warren.
All right. So here we go. First question. Tell me about your business and how you started and, you know, how it's all going right now.
Okay. Yeah. So Ovalifts, we developed some niche technology for lifting lines in petrochemical plants where you get the experience of corrosion at what is called the touch point, that contact point between the pipe and the support upon which it rests. Traditionally, when they built these plants, decades ago, they didn't really give too much consideration to corrosion issues. Or if they did install what is known as a wear pad, like a non-friction, non-reactive surface between those two contact points, they would typically be, they weren't a lot of thought applied to how those were installed, and the quality of those materials weren't as high as what we've got available today. So we started off, one of my partners was part of one of my partners was a contractor to Sasol in their Secunda Synfuels complex, which is located east of Johannesburg in South Africa. And they'd been contractors for decades with them. And at that point, the tank farm at that facility was about 40 years old. And they typically, like most plants in the world, would address these corrosion issues during a shutdown. So the lines would be shut down. There was no risk of loss of containment. And as everyone knows, in terms of a shutdown, the plant is shut down and can be thousands of contractors move in there for that 1 month period. It's very busy, it's very expensive, and there's a lot of work to be done. And so this plant was trying to address all these issues during those shutdowns, and they just could not keep up. The age of the plant equipment was such that the corrosion was overrunning them. So they asked my partners, Kurt Gribnitz and Jan van der Mavre, to see if they could develop some lifting technologies and the procedures around those, which would enable them to address this corrosion year-round outside of a shutdown. And there's a lot of advantages to that because it's much cheaper. You're not trying to do all this condensed effort in 24-hour working days over a period of a month or 6 weeks. And they spent 2 years through trial and error developing what became our proprietary tools, our Ovalifts JAPs. And I was introduced to them about 5-6 years ago, and I've got a background in mining engineering and a little bit of marketing and logistics technologies. And together we worked out a business plan on how we were going to help them take this technology global.
Wow.
So we set up an office in Houston about 5 years ago, and most people probably are aware, well, in most industries, you have a lot of inertia and a lot of resistance to change, especially in something like petrochemical where you've got a lot of risks. So when a method of doing something has been proven over decades, there's a lot of resistance to change in changing those methods, irrespective of what their disadvantages are. So we set up here in Houston, thinking we were going to be welcomed with open arms, and what we ended up with was some pushback. And we exhibited at shows like Downstream, which is a global conference that directed to the downstream market. And downstream is like your petrochemical plants, it's your tank farms, it's your terminals, which are responsible for distributing liquid fuels and other liquid chemicals. So through these exhibitions, we got market awareness, and we targeted both the owner of the asset, your Exxon Mobils, your P66s, your Saudi Aramcos, but also we had to target the contractors who do that work, who do that remediation work. And by remediation, we mean inspecting it to where you ascertain what is the actual wall thickness there. And also then what are you going to do to repair it? And typically that consists of either In worst case, you replace the section of line or the entire line, and often that's too often that's what ends up happening, and it's still happening. An operator will run a line to destruction rather than risk lifting it, and then they just replace it during a turnaround. They lay a new pipe down and they cut it over during the turnaround, and then they run on the new pipe. That's very expensive. So we got a lot of pushback from the industry, the contractors. A lot of the contractors have got cranes that they want to hire, because cranes are very often used for lifting, doing these kinds of lifts, especially on larger lines. And then you got much more simpler methods, such as chain falls for lifting the pipes, which have got some inherent safety risks. And again, that's also why they were doing the lifts offline during the shutdown. So we partnered with one contractor, and we had a couple of successful projects with them here in the States. And we were just starting to get momentum, and then COVID hit, and everything, like most industries, got hit really bad. And it was a very critical period for us, because we were just getting started, and we just increased our overheads with some office space, and the outcome was, for 18 months we had almost no projects, right? During COVID, everybody was, many industries, people were locked down, or they were just doing critical maintenance. They weren't doing anything over and above what was absolutely necessary. But we managed to survive our way through that. And when everything started opening up, and then during that period also, our market wasn't just focused on America. We set up our base in Houston, but we always had the intention of going to the global market. So during that COVID period, we developed relationships in key markets with agents who we appointed, and we went in position, we shipped tools to them, and then we supported them remotely. And we ended up getting, as soon as we came out of the earliest restrictions of COVID, it hadn't lifted completely. Things in America didn't get affected that badly in terms of travel, but there were some parts of the world where you just couldn't get in and out of the country. Yep. All right, especially in Asia. I mean, you had to have a very good reason why you were going to be allowed to go into a country for any purpose whatsoever. So we ended up with some projects in Brunei with Shell, where we set everything up and managed the project remotely via Zoom and phone calls. Then we got an agent set up in Brazil. We ended up with some projects starting up in Brazil. As we just came out of COVID, there were still some flying restrictions, but we ended up with doing a trial lift for 1 week with Galp at the refinery south of Lisbon in Portugal. And that developed into a 4-year-long project, which is still underway with them. We've got an agent appointed in Europe, and they've just done some of their initial lifts on a trial basis in Germany. And we've had ongoing projects continuing in South Africa. That never really slowed down. And we find the market here in the US has now been opening up over the last year quite dramatically for us. At any point in time, we've got 2 or 3 projects underway. And initially in our business model, we thought we were going to be like a tool rental business, because primarily we rent the tools out, these jacks, because they're generally used for concentrated, focused projects. Okay. So they would go in, be used, and then return to us. But what we found is that this was a market which, because it was so, I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but everything was done on a traditional basis. It was kind of simple. It wasn't much sophistication being applied to it at all, especially since the lines were being lifted when they were shut down.
Sure.
And what we have found is, over the last 1.5 years, is that our engineering services, and by engineering, I mean conducting a stress analysis to ensure that the lines are not lifted beyond their design, either their design capabilities or their current condition, if you've got some wall loss at that corrosion point. So our stress analysis, and then the lift plans, which outline the configuration for the lift and how high we're going to lift over the number of supports. That's become a significant source of revenue for us as well. So initially, initially we thought we were going to be a tool rental business, but we're actually a service business. And we developed over the last 2 years where we're taking full advantage of that.
Well, that's good. So, okay. So first of all, you're clearly disruptors in your market.
Very much
right?
so. Yeah, we've been called a disruptive technology. We actually use that phrase when we go into a new prospect. We're a disruptive technology.
Yeah. And so I'm sure the people that are your competitors that have been doing things the same way all the time, as you mentioned, are a big piece of that resistance to change, correct?
In some markets more than in others.
Okay.
Yeah, we find in the Middle East, most of the contractors who we would work with own large fleets of cranes. We're talking 500 cranes, 1,000 cranes, and they've got they're highly motivated to keep those cranes, not just the cranes that they have employed, but expanding their fleet of cranes, because
Oh, sure.
cranes are very profitable. And I walk in there and I've got a couple plates of steel which have been laser cut and welded together, and that effectively is capable of doing what this crane that rents out for $2,500 a day can do. And I've actually been evicted from a contractor's office in Saudi Arabia. This was about 4 years, more than 4 years ago, and I thought I had some interest there with him. And when one of the senior brothers who owned the company realized what we did, he basically got up and left the room, and I was just left sitting there. And eventually, a guy came into the room to drive me back to the airport.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
that particular company has grown by leaps and bounds, right? You can see that. I mean, they market themselves very, very well. They've expanded their service offering, but they started off as mostly a crane rental company.
Oh
So
my
yeah,
goodness.
that's the pushback we get, and you get more in some markets than you do in other markets. But yeah, there's that resistance to change.
So how do you, so I have so many questions here, but let me
Yeah.
ask you the first one. You said during COVID, you found all these agents. How do you find, and this is a question that's applicable for, it doesn't matter your business. How do you find good people you can trust, especially people that are in a different part of the world that you potentially have never even met in person? How do you do that?
Yeah, there's some luck involved. All right, that's for
Okay.
sure. You typically we've marketed ourselves very heavily on LinkedIn, and we do our own research. And then we'll send out emails. We'll reach out to people over LinkedIn, someone who was interested. But some of our best agents are people who just luckily contacted us, and we started dialogue, and we typically would send them some tools. We'd give them the support. We'd rely on them to do the phone calls to set up a presentation, and we would do the presentation ourselves and supporting them, and then that relationship would just grow. We've never had a situation where we've had to terminate a relationship with an agent.
Wow.
We've always managed to grow that. But given the fact that we position our property, our tools with them in another country, there's a high level of trust there.
Yes.
And we're renting them. So, technically, they could be renting tools without us being aware of it, but then again, they need the engineering support and the stress analysis, and we do that ourselves. So we've got a high degree of trust going on there, and I don't feel that anyone has ever let us down in that regard.
Well, that's amazing because I've hired a ton of people in my life, hundreds, and I'm not at 100% success rate. Maybe I'm over 50. I'm probably over 65%.
Yeah.
But 100% success rate is really pretty incredible. Is there something else that you look for? Is there something specific you look for when you're looking for an agent in another country?
Well, they need to have the contacts and have a service offering which is going into our client base already.
Okay, that makes sense.
This is adding to their service offering, right? So it's not it shouldn't be a new service offering to them, it can be a new service offering. It just mustn't be a new market. So they're marketing an additional service to a market which they already have. And they're
they already have those decision makers in place. So they are you are just adding to their portfolio of things they could potentially make money on. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
How do you
I suppose I have had one sort of misfire, and we were making really good inroads into Russia on Sakhalin Island, which was a shell project. And they had a touch point corrosion program, which was underway, which they were going to be expanding. And I had a contracting company I was working with for about a year to get into there. And then Putin goes and pulls off his Ukraine invasion, Shell pulls out, and, you know, basically America, I was in another country in Western Asia, Turkmenistan, when all this was going down, or shortly after this went down, and I was at a dinner with the American ambassador, and he had one of his trade guys there with him as well. And I was explaining to him my problems in trying to work in Russia, and they just looked at me and said, "We don't advise you." All it quits. Yeah, as an American, you don't want to be, because it was hard to tell who was under sanctions and who wasn't under sanctions, you know, from a perspective. And we didn't want to go breaking any sanctions. You know, we're not a big enough company like for doing that. Exxon can get away with that, but we can't.
So how do you even start? If I'm going to build a global corporation tomorrow, how do I start that? Like that's a pretty big undertaking. You just think big and plan big, and then
you know, I think if I knew what we were getting ourselves into when we started, I'm not sure I would have started it. You know, we just kept building our network, because there's so much resistance to change. We didn't necessarily know in which industry or which industry in each country was going to have that highest resistance to change. And so, you know, we kind of took a shotgun approach to it and just spread out all over the place. And I've had some people say to me, they said, "Geez, aren't you spread a little bit thin? Shouldn't you maybe just focus on one or two markets?" And make, you know, and I probably could just focus on the American market only, and we could do very well. But, you know, you get markets like, you know, the Gulf, the Persian Gulf area is, I mean, that will probably be the last geographic area in the world producing petrochemicals and petroleum products. I mean, because they're the lowest cost producer. They're going to be there once everything else gets shut down. So you have to be in that market. And and you look at markets like America, we've got large opportunities here because of the economics of the petroleum industry now are such that in markets like the US, it's hard to motivate building a new plant. Right? Yeah. You know, everyone's saying, you know, stop making this stuff, stop pulling it out of the ground, you know, stop refining it. And the big debate is that going to happen in 5 years' time, or is it going to be in 50 years' time? No one really knows. So so there's a lot of momentum to extending the life of the existing assets.
Got you.
That is really critical.
Actually, a declining market in this case
is good.
Is actually good for you. Yes. Right?
Yeah. Okay. You wouldn't think so, but it actually is, because they're taking existing assets and trying to extend their life. So like I just came back from Nigeria last week. There's they have a number of FPSOs there. An FPSO is a floating production, storage, and offloading vessel. So it sits there stationary in deep water. It taps into the wells on the seafloor, brings that crude oil up, and does the basic processing. So it removes the gases, the water, and a few other, you know, high-level impurities. And then what you have left is crude oil, and then a tanker will come up alongside, and they'll transfer that crude over to that vessel, and that vessel goes off to whatever market it's destined for. And this particular vessel I went to, this was for a 1-week trial to demonstrate our technology and our engineering. This vessel was designed for a 20-year life, and it's now year 19. And and the company that owns it made the formal decision 3 months ago that they want to extend the life by 15 years. Wow. You know, because again, you get to the economics. To replace that vessel would cost billions of dollars. It's 300 meters long. It has 2.5 million barrel oil storage capacity in its hull, and it produces just over 225,000 barrels of crude oil a day. And so they need to extend that life by 15 years, and that's going to involve significant investment. So they've got issues with touchpoint corrosion on the main deck, and we're looking at working with them to address that. And they're also going to be just doing some extended turnarounds in the next year. where they'll shut it down for a month and they'll bring accommodation vessels in alongside, and they'll have 500 people there working 24 hours a day, doing the maintenance that they have to do when it's shut down. There's some things that have to be shut down for you to maintain. So yeah, and that's a big push around the world. And then you got areas like the Middle East where they're building new facilities all the time because they know they're going to be the last producer standing.
Okay.
And the lowest cost producer, no one's going around telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they'll carry on producing until, we stop burning any, fossil fuels completely. So that's a key market we have to be in.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm guessing environment is a big, the focus on our environment. I'm thankful that we want to save our environment is a good
absolutely.
motivator for your business. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Because we need to extend the life of these facilities. We need to do it in a safe, environmental friendly way also. If everybody could wish away fossil fuels right now, we probably could. But the reality is we can't. Not unless we want to have a massive downward step change in our living standards. So we need to use what we have intelligently, in a cost-effective way, and phase them out whenever it's technologically and economically possible. But until that day happens, these plants that are operating are going to need to be maintained and maintained well, where they don't have any emissions into the environment, and there's no major capital expenditures necessary to do that. So, yeah, and that's
great. Okay, so another question for you, completely different question.
Yeah.
If you were starting over again, when you joined the company, what's one thing you would have done differently?
Vaccinated the whole world for COVID. I don't know. Just stop that Chinese lab from developing it in the first place. Right? I don't know. That was a major setback for us, as it was for a lot of companies in the world and a lot of places. I'm not sure there was too many avenues to have. I certainly wouldn't have entered into a lease for an office and warehouse in Houston 3 months before COVID started, which basically sat empty for a year and a half. And I'll say one thing for COVID, that is pre-COVID, if you wanted to be taken seriously as any kind of contractor or service provider to this industry, you had to have an office. Yeah. Otherwise, no one took you seriously. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
First thing, where's your office at? All right. And they want to see you have an office here, you got a conference room there. If you have some tools, you got a little warehouse facility. I mean, it was like a prerequisite. You had to have that. And since then, everyone's working virtually. I mean, as soon as we got out of that lease, we just started working from home, and we rented several storage units, and we left our tools in there here in Houston, and that worked for the period. But I must say it doesn't work indefinitely, because there's certain maintenance we have to do to our tools when they come back from projects, and it's no fun doing that in an unair conditioned storage unit in Houston in July. In fact, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
So, what we did was 2 months ago, we moved to a shared warehouse facility here in Houston, which is really nice. It was a large warehouse, which a company then broke into small units, and we've got a loading bay on the back of our little space as well. So so condition, we got 24-hour access to it. We can do maintenance on our tools. We have room for a desk. We've got a shared conference room there that we can use. So eventually we had to move away from that model, but that really saved us a lot of money when we just came out of that hard COVID period, and we downscaled to where we were just running from home virtually, and then just finding any place we could to store our tools. So managed to go through that. But we don't have an office like what would have been conventionally known as an office pre-COVID, because if somebody wants to come see our facility, it's a little warehouse space with a loading dock and a little desk in the corner. Right, that's not what was considered to be an office pre-COVID, but it is now. And I think that helps a lot of companies. If you want to, watch your overheads very carefully. That's a very useful thing to know that. and that's a useful thing that's come about as a result of COVID. It's the one benefit that came out of it, but the only one I can think of.
Yeah, there's a few. I think the other one I would say is the less less emphasis on maybe monetary possessions and more emphasis on spending time with doing the things with the people you love, which I think is another benefit.
That's important. I'm still waiting for that to happen though. I've been working harder than I ever have.
Okay, so you have any advice?
The challenge we have is that we're up until 5 months ago, I was still based in South Africa. And that worked really well for us because we covered multiple time zones. So I had people here in Houston. I was covering stuff in South Africa. I've got one of our other partners is based in the UK. He still spends his time between the UK and South Africa. So, I could handle from South Africa when questions started arising first thing in the morning, say from Brunei or Malaysia, right? I'd only be about 4 or 5 hours behind that, and I could start dealing with those. Now we've got more of our competencies being Houston based, and I end up with, like, at 5 a.m. this morning, I woke up, and from 2 hours prior to that, I've got a possible project coming up in Saudi Arabia, which is very urgent. And I'd already missed 4 or 5 hours on that. So I'm from 5 a.m. this morning, I was working on that. And so it does put a lot more pressure on us with most of our competencies sitting here in Houston that, we got to really operate off of odd hours.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's another thing with a global corporation that I wouldn't have probably considered, but definitely something you got to consider when you're operating something like that.
When you're a small company, you take that call or that email whenever, right? The larger companies, they'll have people in different time zones, significant number of people, but their working conditions are such that the guys aren't going to work those odd hours, right? So these are my hours. But when it's just your own company and you're a small company, you do whatever needs to be done when it needs to be done.
For sure. And you're kind of especially in a disruptive space like you are, trying to kind of swim upstream, so to speak.
Yeah. You're on call all the time.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, 2 more questions, then I'll let you go. Okay. Number 1, advice for budding entrepreneurs. Any wisdom you would share, or any big piece of advice you would give them?
Oh, yeah. I've got a lot of experience in entrepreneurship, and the thing is, you just got to throw your entire being into it, right? You got to believe. You got to believe in it, right? You got to understand. And probably one of the most important things is when you're evaluating a new idea or a new product, a new service, you really need to cast your net out wide to get opinions and do your market research, right? You can't don't just listen to your friends, right? They're going to agree with you, right? They're never going to tell you you're full of shit, right? Or you're dreaming on something here which has got a tenuous link with reality. So you really need to do your market research, and once you and cast that net out broad when you're doing that, and then once you've done that, then you've got to throw your heart into it completely, and just run with it. And make sure that and ensure you've got the cash that'll see you through on it as well.
Yes.
You've got lined up. If you don't have the resources yourself, you need to have somebody who does, right? Who has the same vision with you, that'll follow it through with you. And we were fortunate that amongst the group of us who own the company, we had those resources, and so we were able to see our way through COVID and get tools populated out across the world and just start getting this brand going. But I mean, we are a relatively small company with a global footprint, and that has got its challenges. And that brings me to the next stage. We're at a critical area of growth where we need to start bringing in outside people as well. I mean, we leverage our core team with our agents, and we've got very capable agents, and they have people who are very capable. But that core team needs to start growing here, and those are key decisions you need to make, like what you just described. You've got a 65% hit rate where you bring people in. I can't afford a 65% hit rate bring one or two more people in here. That's got to be 100%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and we're
That's good wisdom. And you know, you took your core team and you leveraged them as far as you could go, but
yeah,
now it's cost prohibitive because you're missing out on capacity and potential
yeah,
revenue if
yeah,
you go any further with your core team,
yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I need to get that expanded. But yeah, we've got a project starting in Dubai in 2 weeks' time. And this South African guy who we've been working with a little bit, who's based in Dubai, I found out that he's available. We've been working with him a little bit in the past, and so we're going to bring him in on that project in Dubai. So yeah,
Nice.
you take advantage of these things. So he's not a full-time employee, but we're going to be able to use him on this particular contract, and where that goes following that, we'll just see. You know, we should have the cash flow, or maybe we can work something out with him to make it more long term.
I love it. I love
You
it.
have to take
Okay.
advantage
Last
of
question.
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I love that you developed this network. It's funny. I just had a conversation with another gentleman that's got a global organization and construction. Same deal. Develop this network of people, some intentionally, some just by chance or providence or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And now he's got this group of people he knows and trusts, and they trust him, and he can count on them to be in Sudan or in Dubai or wherever it is to get work done and
Yeah.
move the company forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question, the most important question.
Yeah.
How many frequent flyer miles do you get a year? And do you always fly first class?
On I had a gold card on Emirates. Yeah, we almost when I was based in South Africa, anywhere I went in the world was via Emirates. Right, so you connect from
Wow.
to Dubai, and then from Dubai you could go out wherever you needed to go. So yeah, Emirates used to be a great airline. COVID kind of messed that up. Right,
Oh,
since COVID, they've been cutting corners left and right. I was very disappointed in that. But now I'm based here in Houston. I'm starting to rack up the United frequent flyer miles. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. Yeah. Yeah,
the
but
one
I
friend.
miss the old Emirates. I miss the old Emirates. Yeah.
Yeah, they have the hats and everything, right?
Yeah. 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 They used to take really good care of you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, slumming with United now. You got to do what you got to
Yeah.
do.
I'm
Right?
slumming it with the American, singing these airports and yeah, and Delta. God, when I went to Nigeria, it was very tight connection in Dulles on United, and that morning a massive thunderstorm moved through Houston, and so everything just blocked up. They said they had hundreds of thousands of bags, and I was still sitting in Houston. My connecting flight to Lagos was just leaving Dulles, so they had no idea where my bags were, and I had tools. Our tools were in my bags as well.
Oh no.
I had to cancel that flight and last minute get a Delta flight for the next day. And it took United a week to find those tools. I thought they were gone. Yeah, it took a week. Some of them had gone on to Dulles. Some of them had been held back at Houston. So yeah, I knew once that happened, if this was going to be successful, I had to cancel all plans, get a new flight on Delta the next day, and we had to pack additional tools and everything. And I had to get a whole new go bags of my safety equipment and toothbrushes and shavers, and then caught the next flight the next day while United was busy trying to find my stuff from that. So yeah, the takeaway from that was, if you got you got a critical appointment on the other end, you don't, no matter what the airline says, you don't take a 2.5 hour transfer in an airport. No, you want 6-7 hours, maybe even a day for that critical transfer. Yeah. Yeah,
That's good wisdom.
Yeah,
can't change.
Hope that helps somebody.
Hey, Lonnie, I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thank you for this. A lot of great points here, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it as well. Thanks, Warren.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay.